In section 4 of chapter 12, you're going to learn about box and whisker plots. Box and whisker plots deal with, more than anything else, they deal with medians. So I would like you to put medians real nice and big here, so you know that really today is going to be involved with medians. Now, box and whisker plots allow us to spread out our data, and it gives us what I call a visual. It's a very nice visual of the data that we receive. Now, inside of box and whisker plots, you have this vocab term. It's called quartiles. Okay? A quartile, now it should make sense. A quarter, a quartile, okay? A quarter, there's 4 quarters in a dollar. There are 4 quartiles in a box and whisker plot. All right, write this down. Quartiles. Quartiles are values that divide a data set into 4 equal parts. The median, or the second quartile, separates the data into the upper and the lower. The first quartile is the middle of the lower. The third quartile is the median, or the middle of the upper. And the interquartile range. Interquartile range is the difference between the third and the first quartiles. So what we're going to do is we are going to break your data up into 4 equal sections. Okay, so let's take a look at problem number 1. We have what's the minimum, the first quartile, the median, the third, and the maximum of the data as shown. Well, what I want you to do first is, of the data that is shown, please find the lowest and the highest values. And, all right, find the lowest and the highest values. I see the lowest. Let's just rearrange the whole kit and caboodle together. So 75, 80, this will be helpful. 125, 126, 135, 140, 140, and 350. So what we did is we arranged it in order. We're going to have to do that anyway to find the median. And now we can label a couple of key values. So the first thing I'm going to label is that 75 is the low and 350 is the high, the minimum and the maximum. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to find the median. So I'll cross off 3, I'll cross off 3. Notice I end up at these 2 for the median. That means on my calculator, I need to do 126 plus 135, and I need to divide by 2 to get 130 and a half for the median. So it wasn't a nice middle number, so I had to find that the median was 130 and a half. Now with box and whiskers, we call that quartile number 2 as well. Now what we have to do is we have to find quartile number 1. To find the first quartile, you need to split your data up into 2 separate sections. So we need to put a line straight down the middle. Alright, there's my middle line. Now, quartile 1 is in the middle of the first section. So I'll just use dots this time. 1 and 1. Quartile 1 is between these 2 values. It's in the middle of your first section. So since it's between 2 values, I do 80 plus 125, divide by 2, and I get that my first quartile is 102.5. Now I need to find my third quartile. So we have the low, we have quartile number 1, we have quartile number 2, which is the median. Now for quartile number 3. I'll put dots to even it out. Now my third quartile, quartile number 3, is between 140 and 140. So it has to be 140. That's my quartile number 3. Again, it's between 140 and 140, which is, well, 140. So what I've done is I've listed all of my different values. Okay? It wanted me to find the minimum. Here's the minimum, 75. It wanted me to find the first quartile, 102.5. It wanted me to find the median, 130.5, the third quartile, 140, and the high value of 350. I will be teaching you soon how to plot this in a box and whisker. But for right now, as long as you understand how to get the quartiles, that's the most important thing. Let's try getting the quartiles one more time in the Got It. First step, put everything in order on your Got It. So let's find the lowest value. There's one in the 70s, one in the 60s. Okay, 60 comes first, then 65. Now we'll look at the 70s. We have 75, 75, 75. There's nothing else in the 70s, so I'll move to the 80s. 85, 85, 85. And now 95, 100, and 105. I'm going to double check, make sure I have them all. I got them all. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to make it nice and easy, break it down, and I want to get the minimum. I want to get the, well, we may as well label the minimum first. The minimum's not too hard to find, huh? The minimum here is 60. We can find the max pretty easy. The max is 105. Now I think the next easiest one to find is quartile number 2, which is the median. Okay? So let's cross off maybe 3 on the left, 3 on the right, maybe 1 on the left, 1 on the right, 1 and 1. Look how nice this is that we found the median right away. It's an actual number of 85. We didn't have to do any adding or subtracting. We found it right away. Now what we need to be able to do is kind of like put a line down the middle. And we got to work our way backwards. So we're going to find the middle of the left, and then we're going to find the middle of the right. Okay. So I'll put 2 dots on the left, 2 here. Can you see how wow, look how nice the quartile 1 was to find on this one. Much easier than in the last problem, wasn't it? 75. Now we need to find quartile 3 over here, which is like, what's the middle value? After you put your little median squiggle in there, what's the middle value of these leftover numbers? 2 here, 2 there. You can see that the middle value here is quartile number 3, 95. So we found everything we needed to: the minimum, the quartile 1, the median, the quartile 3, the max. Quartile 1 and quartile 3 are the hardest. The main idea is that you can almost like put your pencil over the median and then just find another median at the beginning and a median at the end. So box and whisker plots are all about medians. You don't deal with average, you don't deal with mode, you really just deal with the middle number. So your blank is a box and whisker plot. A box and whisker plot is a graph that summarizes the set of data by displaying it on a number line. It consists of 3 parts, a box and 2 whiskers. So what this is it shows the spread of the data a lot. Here is where you'll put your low value or your minimum. Here is where you put your high value or your maximum. In the very, very, very middle is where you put your median, also known as quartile number 2. The end of the box is where you put quartile number 1. The top of the box is where you put quartile number 3. Something to notice is that the left whisker extends from the minimum to the first quartile. That's the left whisker. So can you see from one finger to the other? I hope you notice that is 1/4 of our data. Since it's 1/4 of our data, it represents 25%. Next, it says the box extends from the first to the third. So look at where my fingers are. It extends from the first to the third. Notice that includes 2 chunks. Watch my fingers one more time so I can teach you that. Ready? From the first to the third includes, ready? 2 chunks. Because it includes 2 chunks out of the 4, it represents 50% of the data. And that's saying like 50% of your data lays between these two numbers. The right whisker extends from the third to the max. Well, since that's just one chunk out of 4, that represents the other remaining 25% of your data. Let's go ahead and try to build a box and whisker plot together. Problem 2. The table at the right shows the amount of crops harvested in the United States for a certain period. What box and whisker plot represents the data? So the important thing to do first is, like we've been doing, put your data in order. So I'm going to look for the smallest one. I see 303 is the smallest data. So I'm going to write that first. The next one is 307. $311, $312, $314, $314 again, $314 again, $315, $316, $316 again, and $321. I'm going to double check and make sure I have all of them. There should be 11 total. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So I know I have them all. So to make our box and whisker, the easy thing to label is the low and the high. That's your first step. The next thing is to find the median. So I'm just going to kind of count from the left and the right. 1, 2, 3 on the left, 1, 2, 3 on the right. 1, 2, 1, 2. So it ends up right smack dab in the middle that 314 is my median, which is the quartile 2. Now that I have my data split up in the middle, I'm going to find the middle of each side. So let's go to the left side. Okay, so I'm not going to count the median in part of it because it's kind of like in the middle, so it's kind of just its own little thing. So this 314 with the 303, this 312 with the 307, it end with 311 in the middle. That's my quartile 1. In other words, it's the middle of my first part. Do the same thing on the second part. 316 is the middle. And if you didn't have like an actual number, like if it was between two numbers, just make sure that you average the two numbers that it should be between. Hope that makes sense. This is the quartile 3. Now that I have all my numbers, I'm going to go ahead and make a number line. And I should use a ruler. Since 321 is the highest and 303 is the lowest, I think I'm going to start at 300 and go to 325, and I will skip by 5s. The more you space it out, the better it's going to look. So I really could have afforded more room. I could have spaced it out better, but I didn't, so alas, it's fine. I'm going to put a dot where 303 would be. I'm going to put a dot where 321 would be. And now I will connect them. The next thing I need to do is put a dot where 311 would be, a dot where 314 would be, and a dot where 316 would be. Now that you have all of your important values labeled on your line, you draw your box around the middle 3 points, and you cut that box in half right there to indicate that this is the quartile 2 or the middle of the values. Looking at this information, what I hope you can see is that, first of all, each section is 25% of the entire data. So in other words, 25% of your data falls between these two values, 25% of your data falls between these two values, 25% of your data falls between those two values, and 25% of the data falls between those two values. So if you can picture it, there would be like between this 303 to this 311, that's a very wide spread. And how many ever exist in this spread exist in this itty bitty spread right here. So it's like, in like a word problem with people, you would say like, look at how spread out, maybe this would be like test scores or something. Look how spread out these people are in their scores. Like maybe that's a group of 4 or 5 people. Well then, look how close these guys would be. Then that means 4 or 5 people would also be in there. So it just describes how many items are in this certain spread. So the bottom half is really spread out. You can see like this part right here, this information is really scrunched together. And that's how you read a box and whisker.